Hello, and welcome to Nu Videocast. I'm Leila Swan, and I lead communications here at Nu. We're joined today by Guilherme Lago, Chief Financial Officer and, more recently, Chairman of the Board of Nu Mexico, and he's here to discuss our business performance and plans for Mexico. Welcome, Lago.
Thanks, Leila. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks everyone for watching us. It is great to be talking about Mexico, which is a landmark event for the history of Nubank and something that makes us very, very proud.
Absolutely. I remember the last time you were in the Videocast, you were the interviewer. So
Yes.
I'm happy you're in the hot seat today.
Aye.
And let's dive right in.
All right.
So recently we've celebrated here in Mexico the milestone of 12 million customers. We've been here for 6 years. Can you give us a brief overview of what we've accomplished so far and, more importantly, the impact for customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with 12 million customers now, we have become one of the largest financial institutions in Mexico. If you put together all of the banks and the SOFIPOS, we are now the third largest financial institution in terms of number of credit cards issued in the market, and we are the sixth largest in terms of number of customers. We now serve about 1 out of every 4 banked Mexicans. So it's a phenomenal achievement for a very short period of time. But we are really kind of only getting started, right? With those 12 million customers that we now have in Mexico and growing quarter after quarter, we kind of solidify our presence as the category leader of digital banking in Latin America. And that is not something that makes us proud only. It's something that we use to basically translate into better products and better services for our customers, because the scale benefits allow us to actually provide better products at more affordable price to every single Latin America, and Mexico is certainly at the very top of our priority list. Over the past 4 quarters, we have seen kind of our customers to grow by about 60 to 70% in Mexico. The credit portfolio grew by about 60%. Deposits more than doubled. Revenues more than doubled. So we are seeing kind of the inflection point in our business in Mexico. And we are very glad to see that we are now serving not only the interest of the shareholders of the bank, but first and foremost, we are serving the interest of the Mexican consumers and the Mexican society. So what makes me even prouder about the 12 million customers that we have acquired so far is that based on the recent customer survey that we did, about 22% of those customers did not have a formal banking relationship before joining Nubank. So we are very hopeful that we are continue to strengthen financial inclusion in Mexico. And why should we care about financial inclusion? All right, as we have seen in Brazil, as we've seen in many countries throughout the globe, when you increase financial inclusion, and that includes both consumers and very soon SMEs, it means that you increase economic activity, you increase productivity in the economy, and you lower inequality, especially among the groups that are typically less served, such as women and rural areas.
That's incredible, Lago. Can you tell us a little bit more about impact and inclusion? I think that's a really interesting line of thought that you're introducing here in terms of access to credit, for example.
I think it's very hard not to draw parallels between Brazil, which was our home country, and Mexico. And I think this parallel talks a lot about the sheer size of the potential of Mexico for us. If you look at the size of Brazil and Mexico as an economy, Mexico is the second largest economy in Latin America. It has a GDP of about 15% lower than the GDP of Brazil only. But it has a higher GDP per capita, and it has a materially lower banking penetration. So banking penetration in Brazil is now about 90%. Banking penetration in Mexico is still at 50%.
Wow.
Credit card penetration in Brazil is above 50%. Credit card penetration in Mexico is still about 12%. So there's a massive opportunity for us to continue to grow financial inclusion responsibly in Mexico. And that kind of is expected to bring enormous impacts to Mexico, enormous impact to the fintech ecosystem in the country, and enormous impact to the shareholders of the bank and the company as a whole. As David and Chris have suggested in the past, it is not inconceivable to believe that Mexico can be as big, if not bigger, than Brazil for Nubank. So our relative market share in Mexico can eventually be even higher than it is in Brazil. The unit economics in Mexico are coming along even more favorable than expected and even better than Brazil. So we are extremely excited with this journey in general.
And Lago, how would you describe our journey here in Mexico?
I would, Leila, generally frame this journey in two parts. I think there's what I call the horizon number one, which is what we are working very heavily today, which is to basically offer a better, simpler, and more affordable products that will be compelling to the existing banked Mexicans. And we have very good line of sight that we will end up with a very relevant market share, with a return on equity that is at par, if not better than the one that we have in Brazil. So super excited with Horizon 1. But I think what excites us even more is Horizon 2, which is to actually provide formal banking services to the other 50+% of the Mexican population who currently do not have access to formal banking. That means that they can't serve, they can save their money appropriately, they can have yields, they can have formal credit, they can have investments, they can have insurance. And we are very excited with the opportunity to provide those solutions to Mexicans and to be able to share a little bit of our expertise here and build what we believe can be the largest franchise of digital banking in Latin America.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's
and
a
it's
lot.
very exciting.
Yeah.
Speaking a little bit on Horizon 2 about inclusion, can you give us, for people who maybe don't know the Mexican market very well, why are these customers unbanked today? Why have they been left behind by the traditional banking system? And why are we uniquely positioned to include them?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And it's one that typically when I meet with some investors and they ask, who's your number one competitor in Mexico? Is it kind of a well-run incumbent bank? Is it an emerging fintech? And I often say that our largest competitor in Mexico, it's called cash, right? Today, cash still accounts for about 80% of the total consumption of Mexico. In countries that have already gone through more this cash to digital kind of a transition, Brazil is an example. South Korea is also an example. No, cash consumption accounts for less than 20%. So you can see the sheer size of the difference, but that has started to change. Based on the recent numbers that the Mexican government has recently published, we can see that over the past 3 years, I think more importantly from 2021 to 2024, you can already see kind of a very remarkable growth in the digitalization of the economy. And I think that is kind of what we are betting behind. Now, why should we care? And why are we in a better position to actually lead this transformation? So as you remember, Nubank's business model is one that allows us to be the lowest cost manufacturer of the industry. So we have benefits in cost to acquire, cost to serve, cost of risk, and cost of funding. So when you become the lowest cost manufacturer of the industry, two things generally happen. One, we can serve pockets of the population that the traditional incumbent banks are unable to serve just because of their much higher cost base.
Yeah.
And secondly, we can actually price it at lower levels, the products, and still have a fairly healthy unit economics. So that's the formula that we have seen in Brazil. That's the formula we have seen in other emerging economies throughout the globe. And that's, we believe, will be the winning formula in Mexico as well.
Going back to Horizon 1 that you mentioned, about creating a more compelling product for those who are already banked. What are you seeing in the landscape product portfolio available in Mexico, and what could we bring to the table that is more compelling?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think we started now our operations in Mexico as a SOFIPO, which is a non-bank financial institution. We have been able to offer what not only we believe, but customers believe to be the best-in-class digital bank, credit card, and more recently, lending products to all Mexican consumers. While this has been a remarkable success in many respects, it is still far from having kind of the completeness of the product shelf that we want to have in the country. every quarter, starting in the second half of this year and going through 2026 and onwards, we're going to be launching new products, new services that will allow us to tap not only new profit pools, but also to serve new segments of the consumers. As you may have heard, Leila, we have recently received a banking license from CNBV. Our banking license in Mexico was approved, I want to say, in April 2025, so a few months ago. And we are working very hard in close collaborations with the Mexican regulators, primarily CNBV. And we are hopeful that we're going to have our start of operating banking license in the coming quarters. Why does it matter, right? What is the impact of having a banking license? First, for consumers, and second, for Nubank. Yeah. I think for consumers, it means that we're going to be able to launch new products, such as portability of salaries, which is called Nomina in Mexico. It is a remarkable product that we think we can bring a lot of innovations and can start to more quickly shift from being kind of an active customer to a primary banking relationship customers. So we're going to be able to launch new products. We're going to be able to increase the deposit insurance. We're going to be able to share more solidity and trust to earn the right to be the primary banking relationship of consumers. We're also going to be able to break into new segments. So we expect that we will not only be serving consumers, but we will, at some point in time, also be serving SMEs in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And that is an important thing, not only because it opens a new segment for Nubank, but we have also learned, not only in Brazil, but in other countries, that there is a lot of synergies and symbiosis between the consumer side of the ecosystem and the SME side of the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And what is in for Nubank? I think for Nubank, we're going to be able to enjoy more efficiency in how we manage our treasury, more efficiency in how we manage our deposits. And those efficiencies will translate into even more affordable products for our consumers in Mexico.
So this is very much the flywheel you're always talking about.
That is the flywheel kicking in, yes.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, I've heard about our banking license approval from Guilherme Lago. Can you tell us, actually, I think there might be some confusion about what the next steps are and when do we expect to operate as a bank and what should consumers expect from this process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we applied for a banking license, I want to say towards the end of 2023. We got the formal banking license from CNBV in April 2025. And then we now have to go through what is called kind of an operational auditing process that is undertaken by CNBV to basically confirm that our process, our systems, and our talent are at par with the expectations of the regulators. Once they make that confirmation, they issue what we call the start of operation banking license, which is what will enable us to unlock those new products and to unlock those new segments. For consumers, they should expect no change to how they access their app, how they access their account, how they interact with Nubank. It's going to be entirely through the existing app that we have today. In fact, we're going to be the first SOFIPO which actually gets converted into a bank, which hopefully will bring even more innovation to the digital ecosystem of Mexico. And as we get the start of operating banking license, we will progressively accelerate the launch of all of those products, features, and segments that I've just alluded.
That's fantastic. Can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, the Mexican team cannot wait for that to happen. We have 1,000 new bankers kind of with high levels of talent and energy working every day to already prepare for this new launch.
It's a great team. Lago, you talked a little bit about, expanding our lending portfolio. I think it's fair to say that credit underwriting is one of the key differentials for Nu Holdings in general.
Yeah.
How would you translate that and how do we bring this to Mexico? How have we been applying this model here and what are the results?
Yeah. So look, at this point in time, Leila, we have for over a decade been kind of mastering the craft of doing unsecured credit underwriting in Latin America. And we think that we have achieved best-in-class credit underwriting capabilities, which is not only materialized in what we believe to be state-of-the-art credit models, but also processes and also governance, right? And the combination of those three things have allowed us to actually offer credit to both consumers and SMEs at scale, but also in a very responsible manner. And if state-of-the-art credit underwriting is generally a very important strength, in Mexico specifically, it can be a massive competitive advantage, right? Because in countries in which we see relatively low levels of consumer credit to GDP, as it is the case in Mexico, where consumer credit to GDP amounts to about 11%, which is nearly 1/3 of the consumer credit to GDP ratio of Brazil, the journey of credit deepening, how increasing the consumer credit in the economy is an extremely kind of a promising one, but one that has to be managed with a lot of care for both the Mexican consumers and SMEs, as well as from Nu Bank. And we don't see at this point in time anyone that could be better equipped to kind of play a leading role in this journey than Nu Bank. We are putting kind of our best kind of systems, our brightest minds at play in Mexico to allow us to progressively and systematically improve models, process, and governments, and being able to achieve this growth responsibly. As I mentioned before, over the past year, credit book in Mexico grew by no more than 60% on a local currency basis. We expect this growth to continue, if not to accelerate going forward. And we think that as we bring more consumers and SMEs into the formal credit, more productivity will be injected into the system, and more kind of inclusion will be injected into the system. So we are super excited with this, not only for the Mexican consumers, but also for Nu Bank and consumer credit or credit in general. It is in Latin America, the biggest part of the profit pool, right? If you try to map the profit pool of consumer banking in Latin America, including SMEs within this pool, generally credit accounts for about 70% of the profit pool. So if you can have competitive local currency funding, if you can have best-in-class credit underwriting capabilities, it is really hard for a digital fintech to be able to really enjoy kind of and attack this profit pool and achieve the level of growth and profitability that we have achieved in other places, and we are very sure we're going to achieve in Mexico as well.
Yeah, it's the hardest vertical to master, also the biggest prize.
Yes.
And we're going to get there for sure. Did I hear you correctly, Lago? You said unit economics-wise, or product lines are already profitable. And can you explain that vis-a-vis? I think there's a general anxiety of, is Nu Mexico already profitable or not? So a little bit about the growth stage we're in, the reinvestment that we're doing here, and why.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And look, I think if I may just step back for 1 second, Nu Bank will not shy away from making long-term bets. We are here for the long term, and Mexico is certainly a long-term bet. However, making a long-term bet does not mean lack of financial discipline, right? So we are making a long-term bet in Mexico, but we are systematically monitoring, tracking, and stress testing what we call unit economics. What do I mean by that? That means that an average Mexican customer that comes through our digital doors, that kind of buys our credit cards, our savings product, what do we have to believe for that Mexican consumers to be profitable for Nu Bank? And the unit economics of that consumer in Mexico, it's even healthier than we anticipated at the beginning.
Wow.
And the cohorts suggest that they will be as profitable, if not more profitable, than what we have experienced in Brazil. And if that is the case, why don't you see kind of the bottom line profitability in our income statement? That is because we are investing a lot for the growth, because when we grow in credit, you have to anticipate the credit provisioning in what is called expected credit loss. But we are watching kind of very carefully, I would say, even with some level of paranoia, where all of those cohorts are performing well, and they are. And therefore, we will continue to track them very closely. We will continue to look for the long term in Mexico, but we will not do so at the expense of financial discipline. So far, so good. The early signs of the business model in Mexico are very encouraging. It has proven to us that it works well, and it can scale in Mexico. But we are kind of in day one, right? So we are only getting started here. So it's not a matter of acquiring more customers in Mexico, but increasing the level of principality, engagement, and to driving our cohorts to even higher levels.
Yeah, I was interested in what you were saying about the cohorts, the maturation, right? So we know that the longer a client is with us, the more revenue they'll bring in because they're engaging with different products, right? So did I understand correctly that here in Mexico, we are seeing a faster curve of engagement and higher rise in the RPAC compared to the same stage of the business in Brazil?
That's absolutely correct. So in many respects, Mexico is growing faster, and Mexico's cohorts are performing even better than the ones that we had in Brazil at the similar level of maturation of the business. But yet, Leila, that's really not a fair kind of apples to apples comparison. Why? Because today in 2025, Nubank is much stronger coming into Mexico than it was when it kind of launched in Brazil. And we are using a few of the tricks that we learned in Brazil, such as the low and grow. So we start with relatively low credit lines. As we acquire more data and we learn more about the customers, we systematically improve their access to credit. It's a means to do conservative credit underwriting, but also to foster kind of financial education. And that kind of approach has proven to be very successful in Mexico so far. But if there's one thing that we have also learned is that we're going to get inspired by the playbook that we have developed in other countries, but we're going to have to adapt our playbook to Mexico. And we are doing so very, very carefully and systematically, leveraging on the thousands of Mexicans that we have within Nubank that are actually energizing us to think differently and do things in Mexico that are fundamentally different from what others are doing in Mexico and even from what we used to do in other countries.
Absolutely. I think I should remark that, we're videotaping here from the Mexico office where you've been spending a lot of time. So I'm eager to hear, what have you been listening from the market? What do you hear from our employees? We have a fantastic team on board.
Yeah, look, I know I have spent a lot of time in Mexico these days, and I think personally has been a phenomenal experience, Leila. Mexico has a very deep and rich culture. Mexicans are highly, highly, highly motivated, high levels of energy and passion. And Mexico City is one of the most beautiful cities that we have in Latin America. I very much enjoy running in its parks in Chapultepec. So I invite everyone to do the same. So for me, it's been a very good journey. But I think for Nubank in itself is also a fairly important landmark in its history. It is a way for us to replicate the early success that we had in Brazil. In Mexico, which is the second largest economy in Latin America, is to prove to ourselves and to others that our business model can be exported to other economies. And the early success that we have had in Mexico is a proof point of that. And thirdly, I think it is a great kind of excitement for not only me, but also all of the new bankers that we can continue to make material kind of contributions to the evolution of financial inclusion and the productivity in the countries where we serve. And we are very hopeful to be able to contribute to Mexico in a way to retribute the trust that they have given to us to be able to serve them in this country.
Amazing. Lago, you told us about our long-term commitment in Mexico. Do you have a figure of how much we are investing in the country and what the long-term prospects are?
Yeah, no, we have until the second quarter of 2025, we had invested more than $1 billion in Mexico. We have become one of the largest foreign financial investors in the country. And there's more to come, right? We are really here for the long term. We are not trying to optimize kind of the results of the company for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months. We are here to build the largest financial institution in Mexico over the next decade. And we are fully committed to do so, responsibly, progressively, but we will not shy away from doubling down on our bet in Mexico as we continue to see the strength of our business model playing out in the country.
Lago, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I also want to thank our listeners for staying till the end. And I hope to see you again on a videocast and we can review all these prospects.
Looking forward to this, Leila. Thanks so much.
Thank you.